What is up, NFL fans? Welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Coach, what's up?
What's up, Jeff? I can see, for those on the audio side, they can't see this, but we've got our twins outfits on here, Jeff.
Yeah.
We coordinated it, team uniform here.
That's right. I texted you and said, make sure you wear your red shirt. So you followed directions.
Right.
Good job, Coach.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate
What we decided to do this week was to disregard the normal 5 thoughts or 5 talking points that we normally do. And just, this week, every team is going to be at training camp. 32 teams will all be in training camp by Wednesday. And so we decided to do a division by division breakdown, talking about one key storyline per division that we are excited to see, or to see develop possibly, heading into camp. So, Coach, do you want to preface this with anything?
Well, I'll just preface it by saying this: we've arrived. It just feels as though you never run out of things to talk about in the NFL, but this is real football is getting underway, and so obviously we're going to really be able to kind of sink our teeth in going forward.
Exactly. So what we're going to do is we're going to bounce between the AFC and the NFC. We're going to start in the AFC East, and then we're going to go to the NFC East next. So let's start with the AFC East. Last year, to give you a little recap, in case you forgot, the Buffalo Bills won the division, finishing 13-4. Miami came in second, the Jets third, and the New England Patriots fourth place. Coach, what's the storyline for you here in Buffalo? Or I'd say it was Buffalo. I'm sure that's where you're going to go. What in the AFC East? Where are you headed?
I am going to Buffalo, and here's why. They're clearly the class of the division. I don't even think it's close. I don't think Miami has closed the gap at all, and I think the Jets and the Patriots are in a rebuilding phase. So Buffalo's the class of the division. The question here is bigger picture. Can the Buffalo Bills slay the dragon that is the Kansas City Chiefs? So they've lost to the Chiefs in 4 out of the last 6 postseasons. Can Josh Allen get to a Super Bowl? We've talked about this in terms of quarterback ratings and things like that. But if you want to be in the conversation among the greatest, whether it's in the game within your time frame or of all time, then you got to get to the Super Bowl, and preferably you have to win the Super Bowl. And Allen has not yet been able to get the Bills there. And I think this is a year where the AFC is I don't want to say wide open, but where you clearly have a couple of teams that can get there. Can Allen do it? That's the story I'd be watching.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but I am going to think of a different one so that we have another talking point. And I'm going to go down to South Beach. And I think that the Miami Dolphins are a very intriguing story heading into this season. Some of the moves they've made, or lack thereof, this offseason have been kind of head-scratching. And I am of the ilk that believe that the Miami Dolphins are one poor season away from a complete overhaul. I think Mike McDaniel's on the hot seat. Tyreek Hill, who's at the end of his career, is he going to be there long-term? Jalen Waddle can't stay healthy. Tua's under contract, but is that the guy they want around? We are 1 year, one bad season. Last year they finished 8-9. I think if they duplicate an 8-9 season, we are going to see a complete reset in Miami. And while I do agree with you that Buffalo is the biggest story, to me, that's a not so talked about outside of the Dolphins fan base narrative and subplot there that I think is worth watching. What do you think about that, Coach?
I agree. I wonder if the league has figured out Mike McDaniel's offense. It was a lot of smoke and mirrors and creative motions and that quick passing game and all of that. And they put up some video game numbers there for a while. But last year it regressed. And part of it was Tua not being able to stay healthy, and part of it is defenses are quick to catch up in the NFL. So what's Mike McDaniel's next move? If he doesn't have one, then it might be the end of the line for him.
And there are a lot of storylines we passed up here, too. I mean, talking about New England with Mike Vrabel, and they've made a lot of really good moves this offseason. You talk about the Jets under new leadership, and they got a new quarterback. That's going to be an interesting division to watch. I agree. Buffalo is by far and away the best. Quick aside here, Coach, a prediction we'll throw at the end of every one of these divisions. How many of these teams make the playoffs in your opinion?
1. Be shocked if it's more than 1.
All right, so now we bounce over to the NFC. We're talking about the NFC East. Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles won it last year, 14-3. Washington Commanders were second, though, 12-5. The Dallas Cowboys at 7-10, and the New York Giants bringing up the caboose at 3-14. Coach, what's your storyline from the NFC East?
I think there's great ones in this division as well. You could pick an interesting one from each team. I'll go to Washington. My question is, can Jaden Daniels repeat his success that he had as a rookie? When that quarterback poll came out that you and I talked about on last week's show, NFL scouts, coaches, and executives had him ranked as the 5th best quarterback in the NFL. That's shocking to me that they had him above the likes of Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert and Matthew Stafford. I mean, guys that have established themselves and have been doing it for far longer. Phenomenal rookie year. But again, we just saw recently with CJ Stroud, great rookie year and then some regression in his second season. So the question about the league catching up, whether or not that's true in Washington, will be really interesting to me. I think Jaden Daniels is the real deal. I do. I do think he's going to wind up being a top 5 quarterback in the league, but I think he's got to prove it one more year before we can completely be sold.
And, I mean, this ties in with my storyline. Jaden Daniels, history shows that the second year for a quarterback who has a phenomenal rookie year is either a plateau or maybe even a step backwards. Like you bring up C.J. Stroud, you did last week as well. He did see that step backwards. Very few quarterbacks that have that lightning rod of a rookie year can duplicate that in year 2, which my talking point is, can any of these teams that aren't the Philadelphia Eagles even sniff the Eagles for the division? The Cowboys are an interesting team. Now, I am not expecting them to do anything because, well, they're the Cowboys. And I think the Schottenheimer hire was questionable at best. We've talked about that on this podcast. But Washington, you already talked about it. Can they repeat and do that? Dallas has made some moves. They add George Pickens to be across from CeeDee Lamb. They clearly have to address the Micah Parsons situation at some point, but can they have a defense that can stop someone? We shall see. And then even the Giants, who I'm again intrigued by New York because I'm intrigued by regime changes. I mentioned it with Mike McDaniel. I think Brian Daboll's on the hot seat. They took Jackson Dart in the first round. I don't see Russell Wilson being the quarterback there very long, Coach, before they say we need to see what this rookie can do. What's your take on the rest of the division trying to catch the Eagles?
I've talked to some NFL people about Jackson Dart, and they were unbelievably impressed. As unimpressed as they were with Shedeur Sanders, that's how impressed they were with Jackson Dart. So I would expect to see him in the lineup sooner than later. You know, I think the Commanders have the talent to challenge Philly for the division. I'm not sold on Dallas because I'm never sold on Dallas because they're always overrated and they always underperform. But the Commanders, I think, you know, some of the moves they've made, bringing in Laramie Tunsil and Deebo Samuel and the top draft pick on the offensive line. I mean, they're building a team that might be able to challenge Philly. But I just think Philly is really good. So I'll be surprised if anybody else takes that division.
Okay, how many teams make the playoffs, Coach?
2, Philly and Washington.
I agree. That's what I was going to say. All right, let's go back to the AFC. We're now in the AFC North, a division we know well as Steeler fans here. Baltimore won it last year, 12-5 record. Pittsburgh second at 10-7. The Cincinnati Bengals did not make the playoffs at 9-8, and nor did the Cleveland Browns at 3-14. Coach, what's your storyline here?
Well, there's a lot of stories at the top of the division that you could find with Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. But I'm going to go with the Browns. They got 4 quarterbacks. 4 quarterbacks. And, you know, last week I was fortunate to interview Kevin Stefanski, and we had a great talk on my Call Sheet Daily podcast. And my takeaway from his perspective on the quarterback situation is he genuinely doesn't know right now who their starter is going to be. He's got sort of Joe Flacco in default mode. You know, he knows that if none of the other 3 guys, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, if none of them claim the job, he can fall back on Joe Flacco to be that placeholder for a while. But I just think that this training camp for the Browns is about as open a competition as you could possibly get at quarterback. And with so many guys vying for reps, it's going to take a really, effective juggling act on his part to be able to give them all enough reps to decide A, who wins the job, and then B, to give that guy enough reps to get him ready for week 1, which is why ultimately I think when week 1 gets here, it'll be Flacco.
That is going to be a very interesting process to watch, we'll call it that, throughout training camp and throughout the preseason and even in the early stages of the regular season. But I'm going to go in a different direction for my storyline, the AFC North, and that is When people think of the AFC North, typically, mind you, they think of defense. And when you think about the Ravens, and you think about the Steelers, and even when you think about the Browns, they typically have a pretty decent defense. And then you have the Bengals, who have a really bad defense. They have a high-flying offense, and it just seems like they are trying to go against the grain with what the rest of the division does. And that is, we're going to play good defense. Doesn't mean we can't be explosive on offense, but we're going to have that defensive component. The Bengals have done nothing to improve their defense, including being able to sign their first-round pick, Shamar Stewart, who remains unsigned as of this being recorded. They're in contract negotiations with Trey Hendrickson, who after T.J. Watt signed his monster deal last week, good luck signing that guy and figuring that out. I just feel like the Bengals, the storyline for me is they're trying to do it a different way, but will it work? It didn't work last year. Will it work this year? Coach, I think the answer to that is no, but I want to know what you think.
No, I agree with you. You're going to ask me in a minute how many teams in the division are going to make the playoffs, and I'm going to say two.
Yes.
Baltimore and Pittsburgh, not Baltimore and Cincinnati.
Oh, okay.
Because I just feel as though there are too many unresolved issues there. They've put all their eggs in that offensive basket. And it's going to be a hell of an offense. And there's going to be some exciting games. If you like offense, then watch the Bengals this year because they're going to play some 38-35 games. But yes, it just doesn't feel like they've made the investment in the defensive side of the ball. And Cincinnati, they're just one of those franchises where things go wrong, right? Things that you and I can't say exactly what they're going to be right now. But 6 weeks from now, they'll happen. And it just feels like that's that franchise.
It does. And you talk about the other storylines. You have Aaron Rodgers last year with Pittsburgh is going to be a big storyline for a lot of people this season. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens somehow trying to slay one of the many dragons they have in the AFC and not kicking themselves in the, think about Mark Andrews dropping the pass in Buffalo last year, 2 years ago, the fumbles by Lamar Jackson against the Chiefs. They just seem to be snake bitten. You said two. I'm going to say three teams make the playoffs. I think Cincinnati does. I think they win enough games with their offense to get in. We've seen the AFC North have three teams represented before. I think we see it again. All right, let's go to the NFC North. Another very competitive division. Detroit won it last year at 15-2. Who can forget the Week 18 game where it was Sunday Night Football, Detroit, Minnesota. Winner gets a first-round bye and home field advantage. Detroit 15-2, Minnesota 14-3. Green Bay 11-6. They had three teams make the postseason last year, and Chicago brings up the rear end with 5-12. Coach, what do you think? What's your storyline here? There's a lot of them.
There's some great ones. We could go in a lot of different directions. I'll go to Minnesota. They had the opportunity to re-sign Sam Darnold. They chose not to. Guy coming off of a 30-touchdown season. They could have elevated Daniel Jones, who looks like he's going to wind up being the starter in Indianapolis. They bypassed him. They could have signed Aaron Rodgers. They bypassed him. Why? Because they are committed to J.J. McCarthy. Now, J.J. McCarthy didn't play a snap last year as a rookie. Missed the whole season with an injury. And now, man, all their eggs are in the J.J. McCarthy basket. I mean, their backup right now is Sam Howell. So, and then behind Sam Howell, I think it's Brett Rippon. So they're not, if it's not J.J. McCarthy, then they're not set up to win. And that's an interesting gamble for a franchise that, again, 14-3 last year, and they're really good. That's a really good roster. I think they have an excellent defense, one of the best defensive coordinators in the league in Brian Flores, tremendous weapons on offense, particularly at the skill positions. They're set up to win. And now it's all going to fall on J.J. McCarthy. I think he's is going to be really good. I do. But if he's not, boy, Minnesota will have taken a big swing and a miss.
I agree with you about the J.J. McCarthy talk. It's definitely worthy of time. I'm going to go in a different direction. I love motivating coaches. I love coaches that can motivate grown-ass men that are making millions of dollars to go and run through a wall. Not everyone can do that, but you know who can is Dan Campbell. And Dan Campbell just lost both of his coordinators. And don't think for a second that he hasn't heard some of the talk amongst the media that, well, I don't know if Jared Goff is going to be as good. Will their offense be as good without Ben Johnson? And Aaron Glenn leaves. What about the defense? He's getting Aiden Hutchinson back. Even if he's not 100%, he's still going to be an upgrade over what they had. They really lacked a pass rusher last year. I think Dan Campbell is going to have those Lions unless they, from a system standpoint, are not capable, in which case then it's going to be even more glaring that their coordinators left. he's going to have that team ready to go. They're going to have a chip on their shoulder, even though they won the division last year. So I am really looking forward to seeing what the Detroit Lions can do and if they could repeat this year. But, I mean, again, we could go talk about Green Bay and Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love. They have a lot of high hopes this year, especially after how they played in the postseason last year. And then we talked about Chicago. Ryan Poles gets extended. It's Ben Johnson's first year in the division. Caleb Williams, is he the guy? I don't know, Coach. What other storylines might you be gauging in this division?
I think the Chicago one is interesting because Ben Johnson was kind of like the golden boy in Detroit, and now he's got to do it as the head man. And those are two very, very different hats. When you wear going from a coordinator to a head coach, some can make the jump, some can't. Chicago has a history of destroying quarterbacks. They haven't had notable quarterbacks forever. So they've got the guy at least who has the right resume to do it, to make Caleb Williams an effective quarterback. Can he do it? That will certainly be worth watching.
All right, how many teams make the playoffs?
So this is so tricky, right? Because if you say that there's 2 from the NFC East, and there's only 7 overall. I want to say 3 for this division. But then that's if you say 3 for this division, then that means there's only going to be 1 in the South, which is a good bet, and then 1 in the West. So either San Francisco or the Rams not making it. So I'm going to say only 2. Only 2. One of those 3 teams, Detroit, Minnesota, Green Bay, is being left out. I don't know which one, but I'll go out on a limb there and just say 2.
But you got to pick the 2. Like, which 2? You can't just say 2. Which 2 are making it?
All right. Detroit and Minnesota. I'll say Green Bay's left out. Green Bay's left out.
I'm going to have to turn my phone off when I think that Minnesota misses out. I think it's Detroit and Green Bay get in. So David Stefano's, I'm going to block your number for a week until you calm down a little bit. All right, let's go to the AFC South. Very underwhelming division. The Houston Texans won it last year at 10-7. Then we had the Indianapolis Colts at 8-9. Jacksonville Jaguars at 4-13, and Tennessee at 3-14. Tennessee obviously having Cam Ward, the number 1 overall pick. Coach, what's your storyline here?
Yeah, so I'll stay in Tennessee. I think the Cam Ward storyline is very interesting. He's the number 1 overall pick. He's going to a Titans team that really lacks skill position players. They don't have explosive players. I mean, you have Calvin Ridley and Tyler Lockett as your 2 best receivers. Lockett may be a little long in the tooth. Ridley always seems to be banged up. Tony Pollard, your running back, he's okay. The offensive line has some big names on it, but all guys that have either underperformed, guys like J.C. Latham and Dan Moore Jr., former first-round pick in Peter Skoronski, he's been okay. Lloyd Cushenberry's the center. He's been okay. Kevin Zeitler comes over from Detroit, but he's been injured. Like, there's a lot of question marks about that offense. And now you insert a rookie quarterback who looks like he's going to be the day 1 starter. And, hey, it worked out great for Jaden Daniels in Washington. But we've seen many quarterbacks for whom it hasn't worked out. That being thrust into the starting lineup too early can ruin a young quarterback. So that'll be fascinating to watch. Like, how does Cam Ward play? And is getting him into the lineup on day 1 as the starter the right move?
I like that. I also am going to say Daniel Jones getting maybe 1 more shot to be a starting quarterback is going to be something to watch. I think Indianapolis's roster isn't as bad as some people are making it out to be. And Jonathan Taylor is still on the team. They have a decent defense. They just put a lot of draft stock into Anthony Richardson, and it just doesn't seem to have panned out. I think it would be a mistake unless it's so glaring that Anthony Richardson is heads above Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones gives them the best chance to win in 2025. And that would mean that they're going to have to turn their back on the former first-round pick, that they're going to have to say Anthony Richardson is not the guy. And to admit that is tough. It is also tough. But I think also you look at the Colts playing Jim Irsay passing away. I'm sure they're going to have a lot of extra motivation there. And I know that extrinsic motivation factor can wane, but still, I think the Colts are going to be an interesting story in this division. But you could also talk about Houston with C.J. Stroud. You mentioned how he had a little step backwards last year. Does he pick up? Any other storylines you're looking to follow?
Well, I think the C.J. Stroud storyline's a big one because this is going to really determine whether or not CJ Stroud is a guy who benefited from a friendly system. His first year, Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator, was really conservative. I mean, a lot of max protections, a lot of bootlegs to get him out and away from the rush. But then the league kind of caught up a little bit last year. Bobby Slowick got replaced there, right? D'Amico Ryans moved on from him as the offensive coordinator. So now we got to figure out, can CJ Stroud play from the pocket within the framework of a normal offense where you're not getting the max protection all the time? That'll be the big question mark to see if they can unlock him as an 11 personnel pocket quarterback.
Let's also not forget the Jaguars, the huge trade on draft day to go up and get Travis Hunter, giving up a first-round pick in 2026 to the Cleveland Browns. Man, it's definitely interesting. The Jacksonville Jaguars have a new regime as well in town. That's going to be a division to watch. Still, Coach, how many teams make the postseason in your opinion?
I think it's still just the Texans. I can't see any of those other teams getting there.
I will say just the Texans. If there's another team that could upset the Texans, I think it's the Colts. I actually think if there's – I still think only one team. But if it's not the Texans, I think the Colts could do it. But it's not going to take – I think 10-7 probably gets you the division title like it did last year. All right, let's go to the NFC South. Arguably – actually, it's not arguably. It is the worst division in football. Last year, 10-7, the Tampa Bay Bucks win it. The Falcons 8-9 were second. Carolina 5-12. New Orleans 5-12 to round out the bottom half of the division. Coach, what are you thinking of the NFC South?
I think it's awful. Yeah, I think my interesting storyline. I'm being dead serious about this. My interesting storyline is, will any of those teams finish with a winning record? I think Tampa Bay's a pretty good bet to do it, but they're an injury away from. I mean, a lot of teams are an injury away, but I mean, if Tampa Bay has a down year, none of these other teams are going to have winning records. I'm not a believer in the Falcons. And I think, obviously, New Orleans is in rebuilding mode. Carolina's still not very good. They'll be better, but they're still not very good. We've had seasons before where division winners have qualified for the playoffs with losing records. Tampa Bay was 9-8, 10-7 the last 2 years, winning the division. I think they're probably right around there again this year. So I don't think there's not a single team in that division that I feel can make any reasonable noise in the postseason.
No, and my storyline was, is anyone even going to compete with Tampa Bay for the division? I don't think there is. Maybe Atlanta. And this is Bryce Young. Would you say this is his last chance to prove himself?
Yeah, I think Bryce Young actually did some good things last year. I think he came along, and his development will be interesting. Was that a mirage, or is he actually starting to get it? When we go back to the Cam Ward conversation, Bryce Young's a great example of a guy thrown into the starting lineup far too soon on a bad football team who just absolutely got abused, and it took a toll probably on his psyche as much as on his physical play. But he was able to figure some things out last year under Dave Canales, and he might actually play some decent football this year.
That'll be a storyline to watch for sure. We think we're assuming one team, correct, makes the postseason.
One team, yes.
And do you think it's the Bucks? That's what I think.
Yeah, I think it's the Bucks as well. Yep.
All right, let's finish up the AFC with the AFC West. Kansas City, obviously 15-2. They win the division last year. The LA Chargers, who also make the postseason, are 11-6. Denver also made the postseason, 10-7. And then the Las Vegas Raiders, 4-13. Very intriguing storylines here, Coach. Which direction are you thinking?
Well, I'm fascinated with the Raiders experiment. Well, everybody else in the NFL, not everybody, but most of the NFL is putting their stock into the passing game and being explosive at the wide receiver position. You have a couple of teams, Pittsburgh and the Chargers come to mind, but definitely now the Raiders that are taking the back to the future approach. I mean, they've gone back to get 74-year-old Pete Carroll, who will be the oldest head coach in NFL history this year. They've brought back Chip Kelly, who's a run game guru, and they've drafted Ashton Genty. They're going to run the football, and they're going to run the ball, and then they're going to play action pass, and they got a couple of really good tight ends and a fairly athletic quarterback in Geno Smith. So I think the Raiders, I'll be really interested to see how that works. Can the Raiders double down on an offense that feels like it was a little bit more relevant 15 years ago than it does today?
The Raiders project is definitely intriguing with Pete Carroll at the helm. I'm going to go with Denver. To me, Denver they are a team that no one is really talking about, not in the division, not in the AFC, what does Bo Nix look like in year 2? Like, that's an interesting storyline. And then you have the defensive player of the year in Surtain and in the secondary. And they have a very good secondary across the board. I think their defense is one of the most underrated defenses in the National Football League. The offense, can they just move the football? It's a very intriguing team. You think the longer that Sean Payton has there in Denver, the more legitimate they're going to be in this division. I don't necessarily think that 3 teams make the postseason, but I do think they're way more competitive this year, even than they were last year, and they're 10-7 last year. What's your thoughts on the Broncos?
No, I like the Broncos a lot. I think Sean Payton's doing some really good things there. I think Bo Nix is a great fit for what he wants to do offensively. And I do think 3 teams will make the division or make the playoffs out of this division. I think Kansas City and Denver for sure. And then really the question becomes, who's that 7th team in the AFC? Is it Cincinnati or Pittsburgh out of the AFC North? Is it the Chargers or or Vegas out of the West? And I don't know. The Chargers, they just have this way of kind of like sneaking into the playoffs every year and then losing in the first round. And I just kind of feel like that's going to be the recipe again. They'll get in as the 7 seed. They'll lose in the first round, and everybody will be like, "Oh, that team, they can never pull it together when it counts."
Could say the same thing about Pittsburgh, but I'm not going to go there. I think the 2 teams make it from the West. I'm going to go with the Chiefs, and I'm going to go with the Broncos. And I think the Chargers, I think they're going to be competitive, and like you said, they're going to be there at the end, but I had the Bengals getting in, so I'm going to go with 2. Let's go to the NFC West to finish things up. An interesting division here. The Rams won it last year at 10-7, beating out the Seahawks, who were also 10-7. Arizona was 3rd at 8-9, and the San Francisco 49ers, it was really weird. A team coming off of a Super Bowl appearance finishes 6-11. They were injured across the board. Christian McCaffrey, all that stuff. What's your storyline to watch here?
My storyline for the West is, are the Rams legitimate contenders with the best teams in the NFC? Because I think people forget they were really close to knocking off the Eagles in Philly in the snow in the playoffs last season. Had the ball inside Philly's 20 with under a minute to go, down 6. And were turned away by 2 monstrous plays from Jalen Carter. But they were sneakily close. And they've gone out this offseason. They've added Devonta Adams to that offense. They've their tight end that they picked out of Oregon, Terrence Ferguson, I think is an absolute perfect match for Sean McVay's offense. And they've been good on defense for the last several years. I just feel like the Rams have an opportunity to compete with the Eagles for the top spot in the NFC. You got obviously some good teams in the NFC North, but it would not shock me if the Rams actually won the conference.
Wow. Okay. My storyline is the 49ers. I think that last year was an aberration. I talked about the injuries. I think that this is a team that's going to contend for a division title. I have them making the playoffs. I think 2 teams from the West get in. I think that the San Francisco 49ers, they take care of Brock Purdy. They're hopeful to get Brandon Ayuk back at some point this year. Yes, they got rid of Deebo Samuel. They're hoping Ricky Pearsall can come in and be a big-time player. George Kittle gets paid. They seem to have kind of figured out a lot of this stuff. I want to see them put it on the field. They're so much better than 6-11 last year. I think they're going to be a very good team this year. That's my storyline. And then also, there's another storyline I'm interested in is Seattle. Seattle signed Sam Darnold, but it kind of felt like they were just restarting on the fly. Like they trade DK Metcalf to Pittsburgh. You trade Geno Smith to the Raiders. Like, what are you doing? But then you bring in Darnold. I don't know. Coach, there's some interesting storylines there. What do you think?
I think, Mike McDonald is putting his stamp on that team. You're seeing him now maybe bring in the pieces that he wants. Probably some salary cap financial issues there figuring into some of their decisions as well. So that does feel like a team in transition. I think they'll be decent. I think they'll probably be around a 500 team, but I don't see them making the playoffs.
All right. So you have 2 or just 1 making the playoffs in this?
I got 2. I got 2 from the East, 2 from the North, 1 from the South, and 2 from the West.
Who's your West outside of the Rams?
The 49ers. Yeah. I think this is a bounce back year for them.
Okay. All right, this has been a good experiment. It's hard to believe we're back, Coach. We are back. Football is back. I'm excited. I know you are because we were making up stuff a bunch this summer to create some content, but we gave you a show every week. I hope you all enjoy. Coach, go ahead and plug your Call Sheet Daily. Go ahead and talk about the Kevin Stefanski interview. We teased it last week. It's out. It's great. I encourage everyone to listen, but go ahead and talk about what's coming up.
He was awesome, Coach Stefanski. Incredibly generous with both his time and his thoughts. The topic was all of the work that goes into the NFL offseason to actually get you to the point where you're ready to open training camp. And he gave a great peek behind the curtain at everything an NFL head coach is involved in, from the self-scouting process that starts as soon as the previous season ends through the combine, free agency, the draft, mini camps. He just basically said, here's in the NFL how head coaches are involved in all of that, how all of that works. So if you get a chance, Call Sheet Daily with KT Smith, and then the Kevin Stefanski interview was from last Wednesday. It was a tremendous show.
Yeah, absolutely was. I loved when he was talking about how he was learning how to scout players himself, and a former scout told him, if you're enjoying watching the film, then you probably are enjoying it for a reason. That's a good guy. He said if you're struggling to get through it, that tells you all you need to know. So really good stuff. Go check that out again wherever you get your podcast by searching the Call Sheet Daily with Kevin Smith. Go find the Stefanski interview. Well worth your time, Coach. That's a wrap for another NFL Whip Round. By the time we talk next week, everyone will be at camp. We'll be having real football to talk about. Should be a lot of fun. In the meantime, check out all of our podcasts on the Fans First Sports Network NFL feed, as well as if you want our Steelers coverage, it's Steel Curtain Network. But that's it. Enjoy the rest of your week, folks. Coach, thanks for your time. We'll see you.